I get home loans. That's essentially what I do. But I think that's it's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of like getting a home loan is relatively easy, but actually doing it in a way that improves people's position actually makes them sit back and go, wow, that made a difference, or it changes their life. When you become a finance broker, and a good one, you invest yourself in your clients' lives, right? And so they will always come back to you, even if it's just for those little questions.
Welcome to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, the leading weekly show to help you unlock your full self, health and wealth potential. I'm your host, Bushy Martin, and each week I go deep with the best investors, experts, leaders and founders to find out what it takes to break free from the grind, discover freedom and live by design. Subscribe now and join me and get invested in the life you really want. Let's get started.
Hi, freedom fighters. Are you struggling to borrow enough to secure your next property or refinance your home loan as rates continue to rise, and you just don't know what you can do about it or what other options you have? If your loan borrowing capacity is now maxed out, what else, if anything, can you do to buy property? Given all of the recent renewed talk of buying property by setting up a self-managed super fund or SMSF, how does this work? And is borrowing through your SMSF the right thing for you? And while we're on the subject of lending, what's important to you and what are the most important things you need to consider when it comes to borrowing money to buy property? And finally, when do you start thinking about your finance for your property purchases? These are all really key questions that you need to consider if you're serious about achieving sustainable success in the property arena. But sadly, many property buyers and investors tend to focus on the property first and foremost and only seriously start to consider how they're going to finance the purchase when they're making an offer. And then the thoughts are generally limited to what's the lowest rate loan and how quickly can I get it? In my experience, this is the exact opposite of the approach that you actually need to take. As I constantly reinforce, sustainable success in property is primarily a game of finance as well as an elite team sport. So the property is actually the last thing you need to consider after you've got everything else sorted, not the first. Because if you're not clear on what you're trying to achieve long-term lifestyle-wise, coupled with clarity on your finance capacity and your achievable and affordable purchase price power, then you're not going to be clear on what type of property and what area and what ownership entity is best suited to get you where you want to end up, nor what you're actually capable of. And when it comes to your home loan or property investment loans, the interest rate on the loan is far from the most important thing that you need to consider, as the loan structure and finance strategy will have a massive impact on your capacity, your cost, and your risk. For instance, our investment savvy KnowHow finance architects have access to over 40 lenders and over 2,000 different loan solutions to ensure that the daily dynamic changes in lender policies enable you to navigate the maze of ever-changing complexity, confusion, and uncertainty to arrive at a customized solution that satisfies your specific needs and your financial situation. In this way, they're very much like your family doctor, who's able to diagnose your condition accurately and then problem solve and triage multitudes of potential treatment solutions before arriving at the best possible outcome for you, as opposed to a lot of banks and solo ex-banker low-rate loan brokers who effectively bulk bill you and then subscribe a blanket one-size-fits-all loan prescription based on the lowest rate, which is highly unlikely to be in your best interests or even at the lowest cost. As an example, you may not be aware that there's more than a 55% variation across the banks and lenders in terms of how much they'll let you borrow, based on exactly the same income and liabilities profile. So a singular focus on the lowest rate loan can seriously limit your purchasing power and your wealth creation. Assuming you've got the equity deposit funds available, this is the difference between being able to secure a $500,000 property versus a $775,000 property based on exactly the same income and liabilities position. And that extra $275,000 in property value in achievable purchase price will actually give you an extra $265,000 in your back pocket in 10 years' time and grow your nest egg by a whopping $790,000 extra over 20 years based on average growth rates. just by focusing on maximising your borrowing capacity as opposed to chasing the lowest rate loan. So why would you focus on rate when you're potentially dudding yourself out of hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital growth long term? You need to focus on your reach, not the rate, when it comes to property finance. And your achievable borrowing capacity is just the tip of the iceberg of the things that savvy mortgage brokers will help you to consider when it comes to maximising your capability, minimising your cost, and minimising your risk. So to help you get a much better understanding of what's really important to you when it comes to financing your next property purchase or refinancing to reduce your costs, at a time when interest rates continue to rise and your borrowing capacity is dropping sharply as a result, it's never been more important to get your finance structure and lending strategy right. So I thought it would be a great time to deep dive on all of this with a 5-star award-winning finance broker. And in this regard, I don't need to look any further than our own KnowHow Property Finance team. So today we're going to deep dive with one of our very own in-house senior broker partners, Sharyn Burgess, affectionately known as Shan, who's an important part of our KnowHow family and definitely not one of your typical fly-in, fly-out, low-rate loan brokers in the suits, because she puts the heart back into your home loans and the fun back into your funding by giving you all of the know-how that you're going to need to prosper in property. So she's also going to answer all of your pressing finance questions after unpacking her own personal journey. So I'm really excited to get you on, Shan. So welcome, and let's get invested.
Thanks, Bushy. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invite.
Me too. You've been one of my best sources of feedback on the podcast over the years, Shan. So to actually have an opportunity to get you on and now talk it through, we're going to have a lot of fun given the conversations that we have each and every week. So to kick things off, Shan, where I always start with this, as you know, here's a bit of a run through for those who don't know you. What do you do differently, and why do you do what you do, Shan?
That's a really good question. Essentially, I do. I get home loans. That's essentially what I do. But I think that's it's really just the tip of the iceberg in terms of like getting a home loan is relatively easy, but actually doing it in a way that improves people's position actually makes them sit back and go, "Wow, that made a difference," or it changes their life. I get a lot of fun out of that. And why I do what I do, look, there is a lot of passion. There's a lot of satisfaction in terms of like getting to the end and having somebody go, "Thank you so much. You changed my life." And knowing that I was a small part of that. And then there's another part of me that really likes to stick it to the banks and go, "You told me I couldn't do it, and I did." So
I love it. I love it. A great person to have on your team when you're going up against the banks, that's for sure. And the results that you've got for borrowers over the years has been sensational in that regard. Shan, what I'd like to do now is circle back and do a bit of a Reader's Digest on your own journey in life so far, and talk a little bit about what you've invested your time, energy, and money in over the years, and why, and how's this actually all led you to where you are and what you're doing today?
Life is such an amazing thing, and I think you can just fit so much into it if you really try to. My investment journey has been so far and so wide, but I think it actually really started, I'll show my age here. I think it really started back when I was really young and we had all the 1 and 2 cent pieces. It wasn't in the day of pennies and so forth, not that far back. But I was,
yeah. Shan, so I'm showing my age now.
Saying that, but anyway, let's move on. I had the ice cream bucket, that was full of 1 and 2 cent pieces, and it was just like chain fodder to my parents. For me, it was like I would sit there and I would play bank tellers with my brothers, and I was in my element. And I thought, all this money, it was probably like $2.50, but all this money, what can you do with that? And like you can shift it over. So for me, the concept of all of that started really, really early. Where I invested all my time and my energy over the years, it definitely has changed. I've always been very active in investing. I've always done it. What's really important though, it hasn't always been in property. Property's always been there, but my 20s, I actually spent traveling the world on cruise ships because I felt it was the most efficient way to see as much of the world as I could. And I would work for 8 months on, 2 months off, and in that 2 months, spend a month at home and then a month inland in a country that you can't see on a cruise ship because you only go to the external, geographic locations. So there was always this, this dedication to exploring and being curious and giving that energy and that time. So.
And there's nothing greater than travel to open your eyes and really broaden your horizons. So as far as that goes, and the resilience that goes with that travel piece is also character building as far as that goes. If you sort of look back on the journey up to that point, how do you think your upbringing's affected who you become and what you're doing?
Look, I think it's affected me hugely. In particular, my father, but my parents are avid investors. They are fully retired now and they still hold investment properties. But my upbringing was very much, then don't teach you. They teach by doing, not teach by actually verbalizing or sitting down. This is what you can put here and that sort of stuff. So it was very, very different. It wasn't like a learn from learning. It was a learn from watching. And this is where hindsight's so amazing. I could look back on my childhood now. In today's economy, we spent every single school holidays, we were away. Granted, it was in a tent or a caravan, but we were always away. Dad was always at work, but we didn't live extravagantly. But I also grew up on 30 acres in the middle of suburbia, and we never really needed or wanted for anything. And so when my hindsight, I look back and go, how did you do that? That's phenomenal. How did you do that? So it was more by watching what they did and how they did it quietly in the background, and then, taking that on board and kind of going, okay, well, what can I do with this? So it's definitely, and still impacts me today.
Yeah, I love it. That's that osmosis exercise that sort of seeps into your pores without you being aware of it has a profound long-term impact. Let's circle back now to you travel the world in the cruise ships. There's a big distance between there and becoming a finance broker. Let's fill in the gaps and take us through that part of the journey.
There's a few little gaps in there, maybe a few years. Okay, one of the jobs that I started on cruise ships, I am technically I'm trained as an esthetician, so a skin specialist. So I started working on cruise ships as a fitness trainer or a skin specialist, and that got me in to that sort of industry. I ended up being the day spa manager. Now, when we talk cruise ships, we're talking 10,000 people cruise ships, like big ones.
Yeah.
And so I ended up being the day spa manager for a number of years within that environment where I had like 30 staff and so forth. When that I sort of was getting to the end of that, I didn't really want to go back to, on the tools per se. Yeah. I wanted more. So I ended up buying an Ella Vachet franchise based in Coolum in Queensland, right near Noosa. And I thought, this is going to be amazing. I can nail this. I've run day spas on cruise ships. I'm going to be incredible. Fast forward into a really, really crash course into business cash flow management and what it actually takes to, manage staff that, you hire or fire, and also keeping everything afloat. So that was fun. I did last a few years and I did sell it as a profit, but it didn't come without its pains and tribulations and learnings as well, I admit. By then I already had my first daughter. She was about 3 when I sold the salon. And so I went back and worked for another salon. I just wanted to be a mum. Does that make sense? So I wanted to go back, be a mum, and go to work, go home and tune off. I just needed this brain space to sort of make all that extra noise stop. And so I did that for a few years. I moved around the country, ended up in Western Australia, ended up divorced, Um, and throughout all of that, I worked for one of Australia's largest banks. So I was quite fortunate to transfer from one side of the country to the other, helped that particular bank grow their branch network. I realised my childhood dream. I started out as a bank teller, which was fun. I literally got to play with money every day. But they wanted me in the lending space very quickly. So I didn't stay very long in that role and ended up becoming a lending manager and helped them expand their Western Australian network. And I did that for about almost 10 years until I had my son and went on maternity leave and again started asking that question. There has to be more. Like, do I have to go back to the 9 to 5? Please tell me that I don't have to go back and do this anymore. So I went digging as to what I can do. And then from there, I started loan processing. I had a few networks. Even when I worked at the bank, I found that the products, the loan style that people could choose from was so limited that I needed a broker on call for all of those clients that I couldn't look after with that bank.
Yeah.
And so very quickly fell into becoming a loan processor for a network of brokers.
Yeah, now, I just want to jump in there, Sharyn, because the people listening in may not understand fully what a loan processor does, because it's not just filling in forms and paperwork. There's an enormous amount involved in the loan processing piece. And in fact, I firmly believe that it makes or breaks a broker in that context, because a lot of brokers will try and do it all themselves and try to, as a single person show, try and do end to end, and they just either don't have a life or they burn out and crash and give up. But the process on loan processing is a fundamental part of the whole equation in terms of result you get from the bank and the client experience. So can you talk a little bit more about that so that those listening in understand the pivotal part of the loan processing part in the overall equation?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so true what you said. A loan processor will make or break the broker and how they can look after their clients. I quite often joke and say that a loan processor is the right arm, the left arm, and the heartbeat of the broker. So if they're not amazing, then the broker will not be amazing, even if they can do the job. But essentially, what is the role of a loan processor? Once the actual loan that you need, even as far as any structuring that's required, is isolated from the broker, then the loan processor does all of the, let's call it admin work, or the crossing the T's, dotting the I's. This, in our current climate where brokers are actually governed by BID or best interest duty, there's a lot of requirements. The due diligence is huge in what we do, and the actual amount of work it can take to write a loan can actually time-wise be quite crippling. So loan processors are there to actually help that journey. Essentially, the broker has to outline a process and has to set up systems and everything for the loan processor to do that part of the job. But when it's done correctly, the actual loan processor can actually make the whole process fly through faster and ensure the customer journey ends with a nice big happy smile and let's call it a 5-star Google review rating. Yeah. That's the journey, and that's what they aim for. Do we all hit the mark?
Yeah, it's spot on. And I think, sharing that's really important, because you've lived, eaten, and been breathing the loan processing exercise for quite some time, which is how I met you. But once you then transition into becoming a broker in your own right, you've also been pivotal in building our own loan admin, loan processing team in-house, which has made a massive difference to the lives of the team, but also the clients that now enjoy that end-to-end service with a complete team that are specialists in certain parts, rather than relying on one person to try and do it all. So that's really important. So sorry, I jumped up on a tangent there, but coming back to it, so you got into loan processing. Talk to us about the journey from there.
So I got into loan processing. I worked for a broker directly, and I learned so much in that, not necessarily how to do the job, but I learned so much in terms of how not to project certain things to clients, what I didn't want to happen. So what I found is that I spent a lot of time protecting that broker in terms of the client customer journey. I was so hell-bent on making sure that that customer was happy and they were communicated with, whereas the particular broker that I worked for wasn't. So I didn't last terribly long and with that particular broker, and then fell pregnant with child number 3. And so I decided to contract myself out to the rest of the world and was very quickly inundated by a bevy of brokers right across the country, screaming out for that niche service and that niche help of somebody who actually knew what they were doing but cared about the customer journey. So, and then hence why I landed with KnowHow Finance, originally as a loan processor. And I don't want to say that I would never have become a broker. What I do want to say is I wanted to become a broker, but I had this perception that I had young children. By that stage, my youngest was a baby. And I don't necessarily think that the world would have accepted me with a young baby. Like, did I need to do late nights? Did I need to do weekends? What did that mean for my children? But I'm a mum here. And there was this conflict of thoughts and emotions. And is this even achievable? Will anybody actually like me? And my journey with KnowHow Finance, and in particular, another senior finance architect, Luke Howe, was actually pivotal in actually breaking down those barriers that I had built around for myself to become a broker.
Yeah, I love it. And I mean, right from the first time that Sonia and I had the opportunity to meet you, we could see massive potential. And as you know, we're not one of those broking firms that goes 24/7, 7 days a week, and expects people to not have a life outside of it. In fact, quite the reverse. We want to make sure that the big rocks are put in first, and then if you're happy, then the experience with the clients and the time you have available is going to be a good one. So I'm glad you grasped that opportunity, because you've grown immensely in the group over that time, if we talk about the finance broking piece, because you're really swimming in a pool that's dominated by men in particular. It's an aging industry, really. Yeah, there's a lot of older guys, ex-bankers, grey haired, bald, and running around in suits. How has breaking into the field as a female, has that created any challenges for you, or on the flip side that there's probably some advantages in that as well? Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm one of those people that always likes to think, that perception is deception. So I can look at something and I can perceive it, and then I can kind of go, is this real? Is it in my head? And Bushy, you and I, we sat at a function in Sydney for brokers, and I just there was a broker up on stage, and I was like, that is everything I do not want to be. And it was about this perception that even I had as a broker, and I'd already been in the industry for years, and I still had this perception that maybe they weren't trustworthy, or maybe, that they were all about the money or how much they could make. And it was something that I think it actually almost prevented me from becoming a broker, because I was so dead set against not being that person, because it went against my core values and my beliefs, that I thought I cannot do this. So there definitely is it definitely is a male-dominated industry, 100%. I don't necessarily think that all the males that are within that system are necessarily anti-women. So I definitely think there might be a very small percentage that are women don't belong here. They belong in the kitchen, for example. But
I
You
hope
know,
not. Surely that's dead and buried by now.
yeah, well, they might be one of those old ones, but I think for the most part, it is simply just a perception and women perceive that because there are so many men, it's not for women. And perception is deception. It's just not real. And there's a growing force of women that are coming into this industry. I do think that the industry hasn't come a little bit forward yet in terms of making it a little bit better for women. And what I mean by that is that women, we're the ones that bear the children.
Yeah.
We're typically the ones that then take the time off for the maternity leave to do at least those early stages of child rearing.
Yeah.
It's very difficult for men to breastfeed. So, that falls to us. Brokering, when you become a finance broker and a good one, you invest yourself in your clients' lives.
Yeah.
Right? And so they will always come back to you, even if it's just for those little questions. Yeah. And having the inability to just say, sorry, I can't take that call now, I'm off to have a baby. It's not quite congruent with the actual industry as yet. So I think that might actually put a lot of women off. However, there are a growing number of larger brokerages that are actually bringing on a huge force of women.
Okay.
Because they understand that women get it. They get it from all facets. They understand it's tough. It's tough to juggle. It's tough. It's real. And they have the ability to be a whole lot more empathetic to somebody's situation and, maybe be a little bit more invested into getting that loan across the line for them as well. So
totally agree. I mean, as you know, Sonia and I really believe in a diverse and varied workforce so that we're getting different views, different skills, different approaches. And I think you've hit it on the head. The level of care that I see you bring to every person you help. And what I love about the way you approach the whole exercise is if you, for whatever reason, might be a circumstance or a bank issue where you can't get a result for them then, that's not the end of the equation. You're not like one of these, I can't help you, see you later. You're helping them, you're putting them on the plan, you're giving them a different approach, and that level of empathy and understanding and then the genuine care that goes with it, I think, is the thing that really separates you. And the ability, let's not forget this one either, that yourself and my good wife Sonia, that your ability to multitask is probably not the right word, it's a bit hackneyed, but to juggle 1,000 balls at the same time and still come through with a smile on your face is quite awe-inspiring versus guys like me who are very good at doing one thing at a time but nothing more, makes a massive difference. So thanks for sharing that. What I want to do now, though, before we sort of go into the area in a bit more detail, can you share with us any challenging events in your life and that have brought about your greatest learnings and best changes, Shan?
There's so many. There's so many. It's really hard to pick one. I will pick one though that I know affected you as well, Bushy. So, but we had a client who passed away earlier this year, and for full disclosure, the client was only 55. He shouldn't have died. Now, you would think that the impact of actually helping his wife get an understanding of their finances, he had life insurance in place. Financially, she's okay. She can actually sit back now and mourn the sudden loss of her husband. How it impacted me was not just the actual passing of somebody. What took place and how he died, his only symptom was he was tired. Very, very tired. Now, in today's manic life, right? And the universal energy is quite manic.
Yeah.
How often do we say we're tired? Oh, I'm so tired. Or, and we work a lot. Oh, I'll just squeeze in some more work tonight. I'll work on Sunday and then I'm going to do this with the kids. And of course we're tired. For a long time, and I want to say a long time, I can't comment on how long, that's his only symptom. He was super tired. And then he suddenly died of acute myeloid leukemia. Now, their story is their story. How it impacted me is, I say I'm tired every week. Somebody will ask me, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm so tired. I've got to get ABC done. The kids have got this. I slept 2 hours last night. And it's like, hang on a second. It's like, pause. I need to pause here. What impact is my lifestyle affecting me? And am I on top of that? I'm not too far off the age where he passed. Do I want that to be me? What steps can I take now? And so it made me pivot very quickly in terms of investing more time in me and my health. Yeah. And if that's the impact it's had on one person, then a life gone has had a positive result.
Oh, great. It had a massive impact on myself. I couldn't believe it, Shan. We both knew a particular family extremely well, and the shock was just, and it was a bit of a wake-up call for me as well in that sense. It's like, wow, he shouldn't be gone. Why is he gone? It just seemed very unfair, actually, at the time, for such a great guy. So always the good guys that it happens to. Yep. I really appreciate you sharing that, Shad, because it is a bit of a wake-up call for us to say, well, hold on, we really do need to tune into what's going on, not ignore, not she'll be right, mate, which is the old Australian that a lot of us end up suffering from. But there's also something else that I'm going to put you on the spot here, but there's something unique about you that took me a long time before I was even aware of, and this is how well you manage the situation. Do you mind sharing the challenge you have around your hearing side of the equation? Because that's something that I'm in full awe and respect of how you maneuver through this whole exercise.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. So I have a hearing disorder. It's called otosclerosis. Essentially, it's the little bones in between your ears and your eardrums. The cartilage gets eaten away, from hormonal changes, could be from a variety of factors. And then the bone fuses together, which means this vibrational sound doesn't get from your ear to your eardrum. It's genetic, and it's generally adult onset. So it's not something that happens in children. It's something that happens in adults. And so I was 28 and had a 6-month-old baby, and within the space of 2 months went almost completely deaf, from perfect hearing right up until that point. And look, I'm happy to talk about in between, because it was such an emotional time and gave me so many lessons. Fast forward, how do I function now? I have implants in my skull that put in bone conduction hearing devices, and I learned how to lip read really fast. But essentially now I've got my hearing lifted up to about the 55-60% mark, so I can function in most scenarios. Like this is perfect. If you put me in a busy cafe, I might miss some bits and pieces.
Hey, I really struggle. You put me in a bar or restaurant, I've got no clue what people are saying. So
sometimes that's better, don't you think?
Yeah, it probably is. I just think, and I think the really important thing here is that that's really life changing for people to go from normal hearing to, I don't know how long the process took, but and you've got a young family at that point in time. There's a lot of people who crumble under that pressure. What I love about the way is that you've just absorb that as part of your life and how you live, and I think while you've had some hearing challenges, I think you're an even better listener now as a result of that exercise, because your ability to infuse and pick up what's really being communicated rather than just the loudness of the sound is second to none as far as that. So no, I'm sorry to put you on the spot with that, Shan, but I think people to appreciate that, and no one would know. In talking to you, just wouldn't know that was even a thing. But full respect on that score. I now want to sort of pivot into your property journey, given that a lot of the audience love to hear about people's property journeys. Can you sort of walk us through that, starting with why did you decide to buy property and what initially triggered your interest?
I think it comes back to my childhood and watching my father. So my father was still alive, but he's retired. He was a builder, so he's a carpenter. And one of those old school, 70s builders where they build the house and then sell the house. So not necessarily a developer, but watching all that happen. And when I worked on cruise ships, most of it was pre 9/11. So the exchange rate, I got paid in US dollars and brought it back, and the exchange rate was 2 for 1. So it was great. Right? Come back. And after the first couple of years on trips, my father sat me down and goes, well, what are you going to do with all that money? And I sort of went, I don't know, I might go to Norway for a couple of months, and he's like, okay, maybe you might need to think about this a little bit more. And that was about as much guidance as there was. And that's okay, because it was enough for me to kind of go, do I need to think about this some more? Like, do I need to, okay, maybe I'll think about this some more. So I thought, okay, I'll do this. I'll get on board. So I bought my first house. It was in Southeast Queensland. I paid $81,400. And
how long ago was that, Sam? Roughly?
It's over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But what the interesting part is that I always remember is that I had over $50,000 for deposit. So I really didn't need to borrow a huge deal. And I walked into the bank. I won't say which bank. I said, I'd like a loan. Okay, no problem. And so they started their criteria and they sent off the application. And then they said, look, we need you to come back in. And I said, okay, great. But I'm flying out back to, wherever next week, can we do it now? Oh, sure. And they said, look, we're okay, but we'd like to know if you've saved this money in the last 8 months being out at sea, but you've been doing this for 2 years, where's the rest of it?
What?
Yeah. And I was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, would you like me to bring in my photo album? Because I'm like investing in seeing the world. And I will never forget the look on the lady's face. She sort of went, okay, fair point. That's approved. But there was this pause, and then she sort of went, oh, okay. But it was a really foreign concept. Like the process at the bank is nothing like it is today. So it's a long time ago. But the foreign concept of that, if you can save that in such a short period of time, why do you not have so much more? Even 20 plus years ago, there was this foreign concept of actually investing in life, actually doing stuff. Banking money is good, but I never look back on those times and have with regret of like, oh, maybe I should have saved an extra $10,000.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, take us a bit further then. So that was the first property. Can you sort of share a quick summary of where your property journey went from there, and particularly sort of dive into any challenges or issues you had along that journey and how you overcame them, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think the working overseas was probably one of the biggest hurdles that I had to. I was actually convincing banks that I was good for the money, given that it was overseas income. I then very quickly, probably 8 months later, purchased a second property and had a very, very similar deposit, very, very similar experience. But I could see that I wasn't really taken seriously. I was very, very early 20s, but from a real estate agent perspective and then from the bank perspective, it was like, really, who is this girl? I didn't profess to be some massive investor. It was just one of those sort of, let's call it an accidental pathway. It was an accidental intentional. It was something I wanted to do.
Yep.
I was always going to do it, but I was accidentally doing it at that time. It was like, oh, this will be good. I'll buy another one. When we fast forward a few more years from there, and then when I had baby number one, I thought, okay, I'll take some time off. I'll buy some time off. I'll sell one of these properties, and then that could fund that time. Except no, I have this inability to sit still. I sold the property, but still went and worked anyway. And then I used the money to buy the business. So again, still investing, just in different spheres. I have since purchased and sold or not sold a multitude of properties around the country. Yep. My biggest challenges, I think, at each sort of moment in time have always been a little bit different. Yep. Some of them are, might be borrowing capacity issues because I had recently changed from a sole trader to a business person, or my ABN was only in place for 12 months.
Yep.
Or I'd had a baby and was technically on maternity leave. So there was all this roadblocks, I guess you want to say, that even I had to overcome for myself. Yep. But perception is deception. There was always a way to get it done. And it was always, what's the price I was willing to pay to get that property? Because sometimes it wasn't always as streamlined, as smooth as I want it to be. But working through those challenges, it definitely, I get it. Somebody comes to me with the scenario, I'm like, you know what? I get it. Let's do this. This is what it looks like. So,
exactly right. And having the experience early on and starting to understand that there are a whole heap of landmines that you can be stepping on in the lending space without it even being aware of it. And sadly, common sense doesn't come into the thinking when it comes to the equation. So starting to see that firsthand, I can now see why, as a broker helping others, the optimism and the ability to solve problems by manoeuvring and navigating in such a way that's always going to get a result is a big part of the resilience that you bring to the table as far as that goes. So I love that. Now, I just want to sort of check in on your memory here. Can you remember what your investment strategy was when you first started, and has this evolved over time, and what's it look like now and why?
That's such a good question. It definitely has changed. I want to say at the beginning, I was investing because I could.
Yeah.
And I thought through osmosis of my raising that it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not backtracking on that, but that literally was the strategy. It was, this is the right thing to do. I can do it. Why not? I can do anything. There's at each hurdle, there's a different, and I think what's really important for anybody to understand is that life changes. If I'm allowed to swear, shit happens, right? So it's all okay. It's just that what are we investing in at this moment in time? How are we doing it? And I think we fast forward to now and how I invest now, it's a lot more strategic. And I don't always mean strategic as in we're sourcing the property in this location. Yeah. I mean in terms of life. I have a couple of criteria that for me, if I'm investing in anything, even if it's investing in actually trying to persist and teach one of my children something, it has to make sense. It unequivocally has to make sense what you're doing. So if you're doing it because you think you need to do it, that doesn't really make sense. So there's no strategy there. And the other thing is it going to give me a 2 a.m. problem? So if it's going to give me a 2 a.m. problem, it's not the right choice.
I love it.
No, and then I go find something else. It's just not a no. It's just a pivot. 2 a.m. problem, I'm out.
That is awesome, Shan. The 2 a.m. problem. You've just coined that. That's the latest Shanism that we're going to add into the equation. So that is absolutely brilliant. I love that. Let's jump into the future now, if we can. I'd love for you to share what fulfillment, freedom, and financial independence means to you.
Look, financial independence to me can be really just nailed down into 2 words: choice time. It's what do I want to do with my time? Yeah. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean stop working. It doesn't necessarily mean work like a fiend. It doesn't necessarily mean that anything other than what am I choosing for that time of my life? And does this give me that choice? It's really simple. So choice time. Everything comes down to choice time for me.
Beautifully said. Well, let's put some shape around that picture of, as you know, I'm a massive fan of living by design default. So I'd love for you to share your sort of vivid picture of what your life vision and ideal lifestyle looks like then, Shan.
Yeah, I think this changes as well, all the time. And as a mother of two of my children are still under the age of 10, so I still have youngish children. So I've got a little ways to go before the perceived freedom of children, if that ever actually happens. But for me, first and foremost, I'm giving myself about another 18 months and I want to be mortgage free on my personal owner-occupied home loan. I'm pretty darn close, but I'm fiercely holding onto it and fighting for it tooth and nail. And for me, that doesn't necessarily mean we stop paying a mortgage. It still means we keep putting that money, but we're then invested into something. Again, it's choosing. We choose to continue to pay what our mortgage would be at whatever the applicable interest rate. I don't care if it's 6% or 2%, what our mortgage is. And then we choose what are we going to invest that in. What life looks like in the future, I would like to think that I am very close or on the water somewhere, like literally where I can put my feet in the water, surrounded by the right people. And the right people are the ones that lift you up and can give you a really good laugh. And I'm in a position to have choice time, live the life I choose, whether that's travel or whether that's not. Financial freedom provides that. And I can actually help and support others and my children to do the same.
Love it. I love the way you've used property as a vehicle along that journey to actually assist you with that choice time exercise at different points. So it's not all about just locking property away forever. The things that you've been able to do for yourself and your family as a consequence of selling a property here and there to free up funds to do other things. That choice time equation is a really important one for people to take away from that conversation. If we sort of have a look back on that whole journey, then what's been both your best and your worst investment, and what have you learned from each of those, Shan?
I don't really know what my worst is. I don't really live in the past. I do. I'm a forward sort of thing. I think probably one of the worst investments was hearing aids. And I know that's an odd thing to pick. They are abominable things that really just don't help the hard of hearing very much at all. They just make things louder.
Yes.
And look, the best advice I ever got was start now and figure it out as you go. And I sort of went, well, what do you mean start now? Like, it's not ready. Like, it's not perfect. And they were like, you cannot learn to drive a parked car, Sharyn. Start now and learn as you go. And it really is like, you kind of go, well, that makes sense. So that's probably the best advice that I've taken on board.
Love that. That's really good advice for everyone listening in as well. If we look back then and you were starting out again, would you invest in anything differently? And I'm not just talking about property. I'm talking about whatever you invest your time, energy, money in. Would you have done any of that differently, do you think?
Again, I don't live too much in the past, but I would probably choose to invest in myself a little bit sooner than what I did. The journey of the hearing loss, everyone sees the end result now and goes, oh, wow, you're amazing. You wouldn't even know. But that was a 10-year journey. And I had to wait for modern science to catch up. And I did retreat to society. I retreated from all my friends, all my family. My marriage broke down, not because of my hearing aid, but it probably didn't help because I was just a shell of who I could have been. And it's probably emotional if I talk about it too much, but the journey to actually find me again in amongst, people who understand what that's like, it's life altering, and it probably took me way too many years to actually stand up and go, you know what? Screw you all. I have hearing loss. Learn to deal with it. because they weren't learning to deal with it because I hadn't learned myself. And I think if anything that I could change, I would try to learn to invest in me a little bit sooner. Thus, I had the courage to sort of stand up and bypass that period faster. I am who I am because of that journey. And like you said, I'm an avid listener because of that journey. So I don't begrudge it. But if I was to change anything that I invested in, I would actually invest in me and my mental health sooner.
Yeah, it's extremely well said, and I really appreciate you sharing that, Shan. It's easy for someone like me to sit here and say this, but I, having had different health challenges early on, while it's really difficult and it gets you to question yourself and your own worth and everything else that goes with it during that time, I can confidently say, looking in now, the resilience and the strength of character that you have as a consequence of working through that and being forced to really have a look at yourself and who you are and then work through that to rekindle that level of self-belief is not mmany people actually are faced with those challenges and come out the other side like you have. So, I'd really commend you for the way you've taken that on board and the confidence that you now portray and the way you communicate, despite all of those things, is second to none as a consequence. So, look, I'd really thank you for being open and be prepared to share that. A lot of people shy away from that exercise, but I think those who really understand that respect you even more as a consequence. So thanks for sharing your story.
Stay tuned for part 2 of this interview next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to Get Invested on the Property Hub podcast channel, your home for property investment insights and inspiration. And don't leave yet until you've taken the next step towards living by design by getting my award-winning book, Get Invested, absolutely free when you sign up at knowhowproperty.com.au or bushymartin.com.au. And finally, make sure you subscribe to Property Hub to get your weekly dose of Get Invested inspiration, along with every episode of Realty Talk, Australia's leading property show for red-hot property investing news and insights, direct from industry leaders and influencers. Remember to always get invested in your knowledge, and I look forward to seeing you next time.